and welcome to another episode of Wifey Wisdom. I'm so excited to be here today. I'm looking forward to this session. I have one of my beautiful sorors that we're going to be chatting with today. Her name is Sierra. And so for those of you who are new here, my name is Shanique Luke. I am a love preparation coach, and it is my job and duty to get you from those dead-end situationships into your God-designed marriage. So like always, we're talking about Sierra's journey into marriage and just getting all of the tea and the juice and the wisdom about her journey, right? Because no journey to marriage is cookie cutter. And my goal here is just to have a transparent conversation and just let you know that there is no difference between you and I or her, right? And so understanding that just being a part of the conversation and talking about different wives' journey is just therapeutic. It's fun. I enjoy it. And so we're going to go ahead and get into Sierra's journey. So Sierra, I'll allow you to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes. Hi, everybody, the internet world out there. My name is Sierra Blount. I am a mom of two. I just had a newborn. She's 2 months old as of a few days ago. She was born August 20th. So, which is fun because my oldest, she's 2 and she was born July 25th. So we got July and August.
Cool.
Yes, and I'm a full-time mom, full-time digital account marketing manager, and just full-time wife, hence the podcast. Full-time, just never cutting off. And you know, it's funny, Shanique, actually, I was speaking with my therapist the other day, and she got on me about saying, I'm a full-time mom and a full-time wife, and I have a full-time job. She was saying, being a parent is not a full-time job. It's so much more than that. And when you say full-time job, it makes it, you think you can just clock out after 40 hours. Not the case. You're absolutely right. So I'm working overtime as a mom.
Yes.
But it's awesome.
Yeah. My theory is always, God knew we had to be completely obsessed with these little people in order to do what we do, right? Because we're not doing this for just anybody. So that's always my theory. Like, he knew.
He knew.
Listen.
Yes.
Okay, so let's get into it. So tell me, how long have you been married?
Yes, we actually just celebrated our 1-year anniversary, October 10th. My husband and I, Sierra Blount, we actually were dating for 6 years prior to marriage. So we kind of celebrate 1 year married, 7 years dating, of just spending life together, essentially. But yes.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to when you first met him.
Yes.
All right. So how did you guys meet?
Well, we love the love stories.
Yes. This is my favorite part because I'm always like,
yes, we love the love. It's so funny because he actually loves to tell the story more than I do, which is hilarious. But we actually met at work. This is in college. We both went to Kennesaw State University, and I was working at Express part-time, and I was a part-time manager. And he actually got a job there after I had been working there already. And he knew who I was before I knew who he was. So it was a few shifts happening where my other managers, my coworkers, they would be like, you know, Tahir says he's got an eye for you. Like, you know, I see he switched his shift around just to work when you work. And I was in a relationship. So I was like, whatever, he's cute, but no, like he's coworker, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then my manager and also mentor at the time, she actually was leaving Express to go to another job. And she took her best sellers with her. And I was one of the ones she wanted to bring on. So I put in my 2 weeks, and the day that I came back, like my last day of my 2 weeks that I gave there, one of the other managers pulled me to the side and said, hey, did you know Tahir quit too? And I was like, what? Like, they're like, yeah, when he found out that you were quitting, he put in his 2 weeks too. He said he was only staying because you were here, because apparently he had another job also. So he was balancing 2 jobs in school, and he was only there for me. And at that point in time, we had already made contact because of work. We had already talked and spoke, and I found out that we ran in similar friend groups. But we actually didn't. I didn't. Of course, I was in a relationship. After I got out of my relationship, he actually found out via another friend. He said another girl told him that I was single because she happened to have known my ex-boyfriend at the time. And that's when he said he put his plan into motion. When he found out that I was single, that's when he started to begin to pursue me. And it wasn't until September, actually, his birthday, September 24th of 2014. That's when I took him out for his birthday, and then it was history ever since. So,
okay. So let's talk about the first time that, so now you're kind of aware that he has interest, but you can't really go there, right?
Right.
Were you attracted to him? Oh, like physically, like
Physically, yes.
Yeah.
Always.
Okay.
Always. I was, of course, in a relationship, so you don't allow yourself to go too far, but
Right.
mentally, it's like,
Right.
you're cute or whatever. Like, okay.
Was he your type?
He was.
Okay.
So we're talking 6 feet, football physique, like very, very much a gentleman. So another thing that attracted me to him was his best friend was close friend of mine as well. He was an alpha. So he ran in this friend group of just the Greek organization, which, we were very close in at Kennesaw. So that was already a nice little, okay, like he's connected in a great he's connected as far as just men that I know are going places.
Right.
He's got a good head on his shoulders. I wasn't giving him too much of the time of day though, because at the same time he was Greek. I know he wasn't Greek. His friends were Greek. And we know you have options.
Yeah.
You have options. You could play the field. So I'm like, I don't know how serious you really are anyway. So I'm not one of those girls, but I was very interested in knowing that he has a good head on his shoulders. He ran with great guys. The guys he kept around him had a job, obviously. So he definitely, yes, he wanted to make some money so that he could do things with his life. So those are the things I was interested in. He definitely checked a lot of boxes.
Cool. Okay. So now you're out of the relationship. You're available. What was that? What got you to a space to where you're like, okay, I'm open to this?
Oh, goodness. So I'll be honest, that relationship that ended, it didn't end on the best of terms. It was it wasn't amicable. So I was in a tough spot individually. But fortunately, that was right around the time that I had built such a strong bond with some of my sorors and sisters in our sorority. So I had essentially something to turn my attention to.
Right.
And that's when I really started to kind of really go in with our sorority. I started to go in with my friendships, my relationships. I started to involve myself in even outside of our sorority, other organizations on campus, really getting an idea of what do I want to do with my career after college. So it wasn't until, honestly, I looked up during that time, and was like, we've been spending he was still my friend.
Right.
A lot of time together. And our first evening out together, we went to Starbucks just to have a conversation. He had his own side business at the time, and it was something in my personal interest. So he wanted to just chop it up and talk about it with me, get my opinion on things. And we stayed at Starbucks until it closed. And then he's like, let's go to Applebee's. Like, I want to continue the conversation. And so at Applebee's, the conversation went from the personal interests and opinions to, so how many kids would you have in the future? Wow, really? Well, it's not my non-negotiable. So it literally was just like that. It went from, we've been spending a lot of time, and this just kind of organically transitioned into, now we're comfortable enough to talk about these things and have these hard conversations at this point. And then from there, it was like, you know what? Come to Bible study with me. And that for me was the first essentially step to, let's see how serious can we actually be.
Yeah.
And the guy was come to church with me, and we went to church every Sunday after
Mm,
that. And
I love
that's,
that.
yes, and so that opened the door to, I'm ready. I'm ready to date you further. I'm ready to allow you to court me, because of course he was already in ready,
Yo,
right
yeah.
in position. Like, I want to court you. I want to date you. I want to date you. And I was just like, let's see, let's see. But then us getting that routine of church, and for him it was actually something new for him. It wasn't that he had never been exposed before, but just as
Mhm.
in college, individually making that choice to go to church,
Right.
that was a first for him. And he actually fell in love with it, to even sometimes where I couldn't make it, he would still go.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that was like, okay, you've moved from this to, I'm ready to make myself exclusive to you.
Yeah. And so I want to touch on that for a second before we move to the next question, because I always have, um, I see where women struggle with the whole issue of when a man pursues you, right? Like, if I tell him no, or if I challenge him in this area, he's not going to want me. And
Mm,
so the beautiful thing about your story, and it's proof. And my answer is always, this is, men are hunters. They pursue, like, the beautiful thing about what God did and how he created us, like, we're
mm,
nurturers, that
mm,
whole thing, loving the emotion. For
mm.
men, I always say, think about the guy, the guy that you don't like, that won't take no for an answer. The guy that you do like is the same person. You know what I mean?
Mhm,
You see them, you
mhm.
haven't challenged him the same way
Yeah,
you
the
challenge
same
the
way.
guy that you don't like. And so I always talk about, he had a plan. Like, he even picked up another job, right?
Yes.
Like, he
Yeah.
knew what he wanted. So when a man wants something, so when it gets to a place where you have to decide if I'm going to stay or if I'm going to leave, there's
Mhm.
always that decision that he has to make. And a
Absolutely.
man that truly desires to be with you, and who, when he wants more from you, no, a couple of no's won't stop him. So
Mm,
even for Sierra, she's talking about, he knew God, but going to church wasn't really like, but he was open to it, right? A man
mm,
who's going to just be open to something, like, you don't have to force him to do anything. He's
mm-mm.
going to, and even I remember when Mario would go to church by himself, and I was like, you know what?
Right.
I need to, like,
Right.
challenge me to want to show up more. And I always
Exactly.
talk about, that guy is always going to, as a believer, right? That guy is
Right.
always going to push you closer to Christ. Like, I'm like, with no doubt, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
those mornings when he would get up, and I'm just like, oh, wait, like, okay, if he can
Yeah.
get up, I can get up. You
Yes.
know what I mean?
Right.
And so,
Right.
kind of two things there, but
Yeah.
I like that story because it's just proof that when a guy wants something, he will pursue it. He will make a plan
Absolutely.
for it, and he will
Yeah.
go after it. Like, he
Yeah.
kind of just was like, you know what? I'm gonna let her finish with that relationship. I'm gonna be
Oh,
patient.
he'll tell you in a heartbeat. He'll tell you in a heartbeat. When he saw me and he found out that I was in a relationship, I can't remember the friend that he was speaking to, but they're still really good friends today. I can't remember which one, but he said, today, to this day, he said, I saw you and I knew that you were my wife.
Ooh,
It didn't offend me that you were in a relationship. I knew that I knew that wasn't gonna last.
I'm not
And you
mad
know what's
at
so
this.
interesting? That having that perspective before even really devoting his life to Christ, having that, because again, those seeds were already planted in him. But
Mm-hmm.
this could play a lot of the role in just the entire purpose of the podcast, when the wife shows up. When
Yeah,
you do your part individually as a wife and you show up and you're just in the right place at the right time,
yeah,
where your husband just happens to be, you may have no clue. It
right.
just strikes something in him and he's just like, that's my wife. Like, I feel like maybe that could play a role in it too. But definitely when a man has his mind made
Mm-hmm.
up, my husband was like, he will say, I tried to run him off.
I'm
Not,
sure, because you were
not on
like, I'm not
purpose,
doing
just
this now, or whatever you had experienced in that other relationship.
exactly,
You
not
know,
on purpose, just because of what I was bringing and just some of the insecurities at the time that I had to kind of navigate through. Like, That first date that we went on, well, wasn't a date. When we went to Applebee's after Starbucks, he ended up paying for my meal. And it just struck a chord with me because I was like, wait a second, this isn't a date. It took to the point where the very next day I called my dad and I was like, hey, I don't know what this guy got going on, but
what
he
does
paid
this
for me
mean?
and I want to say something about it because I'm not trying to. And I sent my dad and I, my dad's my best friend. So we ended up talking about it. He kind of leveled me out, but he was like, feel comfortable with telling him. And so I sent to here this long text message.
Like, so you were upset because he paid.
I was like, it was more of a slightly like, does he think that was a date? Because I didn't say it was a date and ain't nobody at. Like, that type of thing. So I sent this long text message like, hey, I just got a relationship. Like, I'm not trying to move too fast. I appreciate you paying, but next time, like XYZ. And Tahir tells me when he got that message, he went to his mom and was like, I don't know what, like, what did I do wrong? What happened? What did I do wrong? I was just being a gentleman. Like, I would have paid, it didn't matter who it was. I asked her out. So, and I guess for him, that was essentially a hurdle that he thought I was like pushing him away. But he was just like, girl, didn't I say that was no date? Let's just pay him for you anyway.
Yeah, like just, okay, so let's talk about that. Like, I've said in the past how some of the things that we pick up just as a form of protection, self-preservation, all these things just as women.
Yes.
And like maybe we've seen our parents do it or our peers do it or grandparents, whatever.
Yeah.
Are really not conducive to a healthy relationship. So here you are thinking, I need to, I need to let him know.
Yeah.
And in reality, it's really a blessing blocker, right? Like it's put like the walls that we put up thinking is protecting ourselves are really preventing us from really walking in the blessings and just opportunities that God has for us. Yes. So what was the point where you really said, okay, let me let my guard down and be open to the possibilities, regardless of what happened in the past, regardless of my experience with my ex? What was that place where you were just like, okay, I'm open to it?
Yes, honestly, it was when we really had to test our relationship over long distance for a year. Because when I finally graduated, I actually moved to Ohio to start my career, my very first career out of college. And we made the decision to say we're still going to try to do long distance. And it was even, we went through that moment of where it's like, oh, do I move to, like, I just really, long distance is tough, it's hard, XYZ from the past, it just never worked, etc. But that's what we decided we were going to try. We'll do long distance. And for me, I didn't have a choice. I had to be vulnerable. I had to put my guard down because for a long distance relationship to work, for anybody who's ever experienced it, you would know you have to be vulnerable enough to say, you know what, I'm going to do it, but let your guard down to know that, to trust that they're going to do it completely too.
Yeah.
So you have to be vulnerable enough to do it, but not guarded enough to trust, like, okay, I can't now turn into this crazy insecure person when I go. That's not me completely doing it. I have to trust you and treat you as though I trust you. It should not be a question of whether or not I trust you and you trust me.
Right. Exactly.
So I really, honestly, that's what it was. It was that move, and it happened fast. But that's what it was.
So let's talk about trust a little bit. I've always had this theory where I don't even know. You do not really make yourself available for love until you're completely vulnerable. And like, but here's the thing. When we talk about some of the habits and some of the things that we protected ourselves in our heart, because none of us want to be rejected. None of us want to get our feelings hurt. But I don't believe that true love becomes available until you're completely transparent. Like you say, with the trust. But when you say, going back to what you said, I can't be insecure or have this certain stance on this long distance relationship if I really truly want it to work. But those are the same things that we say protect us, right? So I'm going to call him and I'm going to make sure he's not doing XYZ or whatever social media. I'm going to, check up. But I truly believe that, and this will go into the next question.
Yeah.
You allow God to be God, right?
Yeah.
Because here's the truth. When he leaves, so he comes for the weekend or you go for the weekend, when he leaves or when you close the door, there's nothing that either one of you can do to control what happens after you're not in my sight, right? So when you allow God to be God instead of you trying to be God, that's where you find safety in that vulnerability, right? So now it doesn't feel like I'm so out there and, completely open to, hurt, because that's our first thought. Because the truth of the matter is being vulnerable in your situation allowed you to go into a place of comfort and safety and trust in that relationship. So was it really a challenge to just completely trust? Or were you like, okay.
It was still a challenge because, and this probably goes into another topic, but just to touch it really quickly, it was still a challenge because I still was growing individually. So it's nice and easy to say, I can't be insecure, like no insecurities, like, but it doesn't work like that. Like, like especially in the day and age of social media, like it just doesn't work that way. We definitely had rocky moments during that year because I personally, and he can of course speak to himself, but me personally, I had to learn to grow through the fact of I had to really learn what trust looks like. This is what trust in a relationship looks like. On top of the fact, this is what trust like over 500 miles away in a relationship looks like. You can't just say it. You can't just be settled or comfortable in the fact that, oh, if I wanted to see them and know what they're doing and know what they're up to, I can just hop in the car and go 15 minutes away. No. Like, it doesn't work that way. I have to sit down and be comfortable with, okay, God, we did our best to plant these seeds in this relationship. We literally prayed, of course, before I left to say, if this is for you, like if we're supposed to be partners in life together for purpose, for a greater purpose beyond ourselves, we trust that you'll keep the door open, even in this journey, even in this time, even in this space. So we have to lean in that prayer. And there were plenty of times where we actually had to, I remember vividly where when he would come visit me, we actually had to say that prayer because it was moments where we're just like, we got to call it quits because my insecurity was just getting too much for me. And insecurity and like I don't trust you in a sense of like you're blaming me or maybe questioning me about things that has just never even happened. Like, it just it got to be too much. So we had to come back to that point and say the prayer again and over and over and over and over. And like I said, we weren't perfect in it, but it wasn't easy to just jump into. It definitely was a challenge to jump into trust in that moment. It's not even just jumping into staying in trust in that moment. Because it's always when it's high, when you're in the highs and things are just good and great, of course, you're thinking about the worst.
Easy, right?
In that weekend where I can't come home and you can't come up here, well,
those feelings and those
what are you doing with your time when you're not with me? So
absolutely,
yes, definitely.
He's like, I'm going to the grocery store.
Right. So who's in the grocery store?
Right. Like, nobody.
Yes, right. Exactly. It's definitely, and it's so crazy because those are things that of course, we weren't married when all of those happened. And honestly, those are things that could break a relationship.
Yeah,
those
absolutely.
tests and trials can break a relationship, pre-marriage. They can break a relationship. But now being on the other side of it, I'm so grateful for those tests and trials because I've learned that they're so important in a marriage. Like, again, we're still human. So things don't just go away just because you're married. Insecurities don't just disappear. Like, I mean, we can talk about all the things that don't just disappear just because you're married. I'm a firm believer. Yes, firmly believe it. Marriage is not a Band-Aid.
Listen, now tell me do you agree or disagree? I thought that when I got married, all my problems were like, I was just like, if I just can get here, everything's gonna be so much better. But man, did it get worse?
Marriage is a magnifying glass.
I was like,
yeah.
And so I'm like, wait, I thought all my problems were gonna be solved, and it seemed like not problems, but I guess insecurities, challenges I feel like once I got, and I say I, meaning that like once Shanique got married, I feel like internally things multiplied.
Yes.
And I would say, and this is the question that I have been prolonging probably for the last 10 minutes talking, but I always ask God to guide the conversation, but because we're going to go into like, how was your relationship with Christ during this time? But let's talk about the idea of the enemy, like attacking you more, you and also your husband, like once you become married, because marriage is of God, right? It's a covenant that you have with God. Did you experience that? Because I know I did. I felt like
absolutely.
I'm like, wait, I thought this was supposed to be easier.
Absolutely. And honestly, and that is a part of, to talk about that at this point in marriage, you have to talk about it like right before. That is a part of the trick of the enemy, to get you so distracted on everything else that's going on. Like, oh yes, I can't wait to be married. Oh yes, I can't wait to have this bomb career, and I'm gonna buy a bomb house, and we're gonna have these bomb kids, and to just get so distracted with the vision, which vision is God-given. So distracted on the picture that you neglect the fact that, the enemy is still very real.
Yeah.
And just because you're working all hard now, making all that money to buy the house, and working all hard now, getting your body right to bounce back after these kids, you need to be working on maintaining a marriage. And a lot of that looks like protecting and covering yourself now, and covering your future husband before you know him, because the enemy will attack that image just like he'll attack everything else, like, and especially that image. So yes, like it definitely was when we got married. So going back fast forward to marriage, that one of our first, I can honestly say, one of our first attacks on our marriage, which I do believe is, I've learned it's not uncommon, was intimacy. That was absolutely one of the things that I thought, we're gonna slap a Band-Aid with marriage on that way. Like, we got that in the bag. And and of course, also thinking that because for us, we came into marriage with a child. So it just definitely I just felt this confidence of confidence. Like, we never got it, never, ever, ever. That's not gonna be a problem with us. But we left it at that and never actually prayed over it, and never actually just the premarital counseling about it. Like, we just kind of left it at, we're going to be fine in that area.
Yep.
And then we got here and had to deal with pause. Like, here we are and we're struggling with this. And now this is a part of our first year marriage, just counseling that we're going through, because it really weighed a burden on it. And it got to the point where I just looked up and I was like, this is absolutely an attack on the enemy, because I was so distracted. Then we didn't even think about it. Then I literally kept saying, then babe, we never even got to worry about that. We never got to worry about that marriage. Like, you won't ever have to worry about that. And now we get here and I'm looking up like I can't keep my word, and X, Y, Z. You told me all these things. And I'm like, babe, it's not even that I don't want, the intimacy to increase, to just get this high level. I'm literally feeling I just don't. I'm feeling defeated in this area, and I don't know why. So a lot of it is definitely a magnifying glass.
I experienced that as well. So we got pregnant immediately. Like, I thought we were going to have to try for a little while. Like, God was like, nah, I got other plans. Like, we got pregnant immediately.
Yeah.
And I was really sick during the pregnancy. And I intimacy, it didn't exist. You know what I mean? Like, I think there was one period of the pregnancy that it was even possible, because I was so sick. Yeah. And so afterwards, I really struggled. And I always say, I don't like to claim depression,
Yeah.
but the postpartum was really hard. And I had a C-section. So physically, it wasn't even like, it was like two layers, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
emotionally, I wasn't there. And then
Yeah.
physically, it was painful. So
Yeah.
it was like, it's not even that I don't want to,
Yeah.
but it's painful. And
Yeah.
so having to kind of go through that, but I always say I'm thankful for my husband because he was so patient.
Yeah.
He was open to just like, okay, like how can I help you? And
Yeah.
I always talk about how there were moments where I would literally be in tears and I'm telling him like it's not, you can't do anything. And that's why it's so important to have your own relationship with, like, it's not,
Yep.
you and your husband, like of course there's that component of it,
Right.
but having that confidence and that love with your relationship, your personal relationship with God, because in the marriage, and we'll talk about your preparation season, but that preparation season is so important because it really, for me, like, it's just like the foundation of the marriage.
Absolutely.
And your personal relationship with Christ throughout the marriage, right? Because I was like, you can't help me.
Yeah.
Like, I have to go
It's
through
not
this.
you.
Yeah. So I'm like, though I pray for my husband and my daughter and our home, like you said, all these things, the career, like everything's going great. But here I am in a fetal position crying in my bed. You know what I mean? So it's like, it doesn't matter the things, and like you have to be whole spiritually and emotionally. You know what I mean? So let's talk about your preparation season. Like
Yes.
now you guys are engaged, like
Yes.
you're doing your premarital counseling, you're going,
Yeah.
it's a
Right.
whirlwind, right?
Yes.
How was the preparation season and your relationship with God?
Yes, so ours actually got ended so abruptly. Ours was just so different because we got engaged February 27th of 2020, goodness,
Mm-hmm.
2020. And that was, we were expecting, my expectations, my planning, we did all of our planning of how we want our wedding and marriage to go. Mine was, we're going to have a longer engagement because I really want to make sure we don't just essentially bankrupt our lives just to speed up and have a wedding. And even though, like I said, we already had our first child, I was still of the mindset of, no, I still want a longer engagement, et cetera, et cetera. So during that time, we got more involved in our church that we were involved in digitally, well, virtually at the time, because that was also
the beginning
right
of
when
COVID.
everything struck. And that was crazy.
Like right at the beginning.
Right. So we were virtually involved as much as possible. We already started looking for our counselors in church. This was also during the time my husband's career. So I had moved home from Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
So my husband's career was really starting to take off at his job. So he had to devote a lot of time there. And for me, I was a stay-at-home mom. And I was dealing with, one of the things that I was silently dealing with was just feeling like I should be doing more. Like, not just a stay-at-home mom. That's
a whole nother
thing.
Yes,
a whole other thing. So we're not even going to open that right. I went through that.
Yeah.
And that caused me to actually just jump into a job. And it was a daycare. I was the director at a daycare, which of course happened to be the daycare that my daughter was going to. So I was that mom. And we were just really involved in work and of course, trying to stay safe, not get sick, stay out of the public as much as possible. And then my husband came home. Was it September? August. My husband came home August one day from work, and he was just like, he pulled me in the kitchen. He was like, "Hey, I got some news." And I was like, "Well, what's up?" He's like, "So my office is closing due to COVID. They're closing the office." And I was like, naturally, I'm like, okay, sitting here with this ring on my finger. A part of this commitment means you're going to take care of us. So what's really going on? Like, like what does that mean? And he's like, so the good news is though they extended me a promotional opportunity. The bad news is it's not here in Atlanta. We got to move. We got to go to Savannah, Georgia. And so I was just like, away from our support system, away from everybody, away from, this church that we finally both got our feet planted in, away, just away. He's just like, yeah. And I was like, okay, financially, what does that look like? Like, because we've been saving up for a wedding. Like, so is this us not having a wedding? Like, what is that? What does this mean? And fortunately, they paid for us to move, but it was exciting. It was very exciting. It was already a whirlwind, but we decided to go ahead and call parents and call our counselors. These were our mentors from the church. We actually just got mentors from our church to do our counseling. And they all, at different times, unanimously said, you guys should get married before you go, because we don't have any support down there. And this is going to be a real test of our marriage. Like, this will be the first big test of being married, just depending on one another with our little family. They're just saying it's important. You don't want to go down there not as one. So we found out August that we had to move. September was our 1 month of wedding planning. Our counselors pretty much said, hey, you can't do a premarital course, in 1 month. Like, because we were doing, before the premarital, they actually just had like this entire, like, let's get to know you type of course. They knew we were having a long engagement. But they were like, yeah, you can't do that. So what we can do for you is we'll essentially go ahead and sign off for it, and we'll get you locked in to start in November when you guys actually move and be settled, actually do the premarital courses. So our just contingency stage looked like a whirlwind with a hurricane and a tornado.
I always compare that not even the engagement, like the emotional part of it, but like the planning is just.
It was, and especially for the women, because when you think about it, a lot of us, we have this idea of how we want everything to go already. So one day, not even one day, 1 hour, I'm like, oh, in Hobby Lobby, let me go get my wedding planning book, customized XYZ. And then I'm at Walmart, like, I need boxes so we can pack and we can move. And then another hour, I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to call her pediatrician. We need to get one in Savannah. Like, it was just so much emotionally. That, and honestly, this is another example, like you said, why it's so important, why you individually have a relationship with God, because my husband was going through it too. So to be fair to him, I couldn't. Yes, I did lean on him in that moment, but to be fair to him, he was going through it too. I had to have my own rock and foundation to help me through those moments. Because one moment I'm breaking down crying, like, why can't I have the kids?
This is not fair.
Yes, and then another moment it's like, babe, why can't we get the apartment that we like? So,
oh my goodness,
so much, like, that foundation, like, it was God as our rock alone. That honestly got us to that, got us here, got us to Savannah, and got us settled, and keeping us even through that, for those first couple of months of being here with no support system up until now. We still don't have family here, but just making it work past our post-contingency and post-marital, premarital counseling.
I couldn't imagine, because it's already hard enough just in general to plan a wedding and consider all these things and bring your lives together, right? But then y'all have that other layer because you had a little one, you know what I mean? So kudos. So I'm trying to think, do I want to dig a little deeper? Because I kept her on I had her online like 20 minutes beforehand talking, so I'm not going to take up too much more of her time. So you would say, okay, I wanted to touch on one small thing before we move on, but it goes back to what you were saying in reference to having the idea of all the things the relationship, the marriage, the baby,
Mm-hmm.
and not really looking at the foundation and like what really matters. So when you talk about having this wedding of your dreams, but understanding that the marriage was more important.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was something, of course, it's never going to be perfect. The
Mm-hmm.
day isn't going to, the day is never going to do what it's supposed to
What
do.
it's supposed to do. Yeah, never, never.
So how did you kind of differentiate what was really most important versus I'm not, like you said, this isn't fair. This
Yeah.
isn't the way, you know, it's not what I wanted and what I planned. How did you really get through that part of the wedding preparation, or I should say the marriage preparation?
Yes. Honestly, this is a moment, or that is a moment where I just look at my husband and just, I'm so grateful for him.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'll be honest, I actually had one of my married friends tell me when she found out about everything that we had to kind of prepare for. She told me verbatim, a marriage, like wedding planning, and that those first couple of like going into marriage is going to be one of the biggest tests of your
Oof.
entire marriage. So I was essentially on brace mode, like, okay,
Because
like,
she said it's coming.
yes, like, here we go. Like, I think about the gif with the old ladies on the roller coaster, like bracing themselves. Like, that was me. But
Mhm.
my husband, he was just so, and this is one thing I always tell him, that one of my character traits that I love about him, he's so patient. He's just
Yeah.
so patient. And I guess in wedding, it makes sense because we're the ones who are like doing all the crazy planning. But he was just so patient, into where he was just like, he kept saying, whatever you want, whatever you want, whatever you want, but babe, I'll marry you in a courthouse. Babe, we
Ooh,
can
yes.
be officiant right here in our apartment living room, and I'll marry you now. Because one, for him, as a man, he already knew what he wanted. In his
Yeah.
mind, this was already, we're in alignment regardless, whether it's in a big fancy venue with flowers
Mhm.
or outside on somebody's front yard. Like, we're already in alignment with something that I believe God set up way before I even met you. And once I met you, it just
Right.
confirmed it. So he gave me so much peace in that. And I knew his peace was rooted in his foundation and his faith.
Mhm.
That we, regardless, we're going to get to the other side of this thing, and
Yeah.
it's going to be everything that you wanted, which is setting us up for a healthy marriage. And he also, one thing that really helped me with what he was sharing was, my biggest thing was, "Oh, we really just need counseling. We really need counseling. We really need counseling." That was one thing that was like really bothering me, but I tried to kind of like look at these other things to help distract me from the fact that, like, that's one thing that was bothering me. We really needed, I wanted counseling before marriage. Um,
Mhm.
but he's the one who actually went out, found our counselors, connected via email, then brought me in on the email, set up the dates for us to get scheduled, made sure we got the books that we needed to go through the course. Like, him doing all those things and
Yeah.
me seeing him being intentional about all those things just kept bringing me back to reality. Like, this is the most important thing. And because you've expressed it, it's not that we're unaware of it. We know that, you hear it
Yeah.
over and over and over, but it's hard when you're in the moment, because you're like, I just
Oh, of
really,
course.
really want
Doing
this.
it and like
Yeah, in the moment when you
two
see the
different
house, you
things.
taste the cake, you're looking at the cake, like, I want. Like,
Right.
he was just so like, meanwhile, like, he's chugging away on these important things that just kept bringing me back to the foundation of it all. Like,
Yeah.
okay, babe, I know we're doing this, but I've got counseling scheduled on this date. Look, babe, I put it on our calendar. I put it on our, like, yes, the wedding date is there, but also here's the date that we're going to start counseling. Hey,
Yeah.
did you email such and such back? They emailed you just to check in. Like, make sure you, like, so that definitely is what helped to get me through that going into marriage. So getting through the wedding and going through those first couple of months of marriage and getting to counseling, is he was just such a solid just force of peace for me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think when you continuously say trust, I
Mhm.
think he was in developing and building the foundation from trust back when y'all were at Kennesaw. You know what I
Yes.
mean? And that
Yes. Yes.
express. So
Oh, he had to have been. It's like I said, as many times I tried to push him, he was just like, "Girl, I already know.
you're like,
I already know."
over. But that's so cool because friendship is the most important part, but society has minimized it. And I
Hmm.
always think about the place within Mario and I's journey where I remember hearing from God, and He said, "Be His friend," and I was like, "I don't want to be His friend. I want to be His wife. I want to be His girlfriend."
Exactly. And you
And
already
yeah,
got.
like I don't want to do that. But sometimes being friend zone is the best thing that can happen to you
Hmm.
because it does allow you to establish that solid, you said it so many times, solid foundation.
Hmm.
Um, so that when things like this come up, and it will throughout a relationship or engagement through marriage, having understanding that you guys are friends first.
Yeah.
And I think the friendship is really what prevents so many other things from taking place because I don't look at you as just my lover or this romantic this thing.
Yes. This love affair.
You're
Yes.
right, but you're
Yeah.
my friend.
Exactly.
And we have a different respect for people who we have friendships with versus I don't care how many times y'all been intimate, had,
Right.
physically sex for people who don't know what physical intimacy is. I don't care how many, you know what I mean? Like how
Yeah.
much you do that with someone. Friendship is really what makes the foundation solid to where
Absolutely.
when things happen, your relationship doesn't fold. Um,
Exactly.
and that's what's really most important in a marriage.
Yeah.
So, okay. If you could give your single self, so either express Sierra or just with everything that you've learned, you're a mom of two now and married and
Yeah.
you know doing amazing things. If you could give her some advice, what would it be?
Ooh. I would probably tell her, don't be afraid to spend more time alone.
Mm,
Because I've learned, like you mentioned a second ago, I've learned the benefit of it. And it took me a minute to get to that point to where I learned that being alone isn't lonely. All the cliches that kind of are surrounded with it, but it's so, when you're talking about bringing God in the center of it,
yeah.
it's so true. Those cliches now have biblical meaning behind them. That's
Mhm.
where God can mold you. That's where He can use you in the darkness. Like that's where you learn to fight, honestly. And when you're alone, that's how you learn to fight
Yeah.
through those mental attacks that will continue to come for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Even in this day and age, like when you're talking about social media and just processing things. We're processing so much information nowadays. So those things, when you're faced with something that's new or fast or quick, things that are going on when it comes to social justice and things that are going on with political biases and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When you're alone, you can one express like, okay, this is how Sierra, this is how I
Right.
feel without any judgment, just me
Yep.
and this is how I feel about it. Okay, now God, what do you say about it? And
Mhm.
just giving yourself that space to grow and develop alone and being okay with that. With
Yeah.
That's what I would tell my single self. Like, girl, you don't have to dive into you don't have to dive. Focus, like you said, friendships being most important, but the best friendship is the friendship that you will have with God.
Mm,
So developing that friendship,
yeah.
and to do that, you need to be alone. You need to take some time to do that alone. So that's what I would tell my single self. Definitely, girl.
Yeah. That's
Don't
good.
don't need a prayer
I
closet
I was
now.
I was so afraid of that.
Hmm.
I just did. It's so funny because I was a homebody. I've always been a homebody,
Hmm.
but I think even being at home, I would just be so busy with things.
Hmm.
But there was also this fear of loneliness
Hmm.
because I dealt with low self esteem, and I would always like equate, or or I'll say this: the things that I tolerated in my relationships were due to. Uh-oh. Okay, you were frozen for a second. The things that I tolerated in my relationships were due to the lack of self-love, but my little digging deep session and getting to what helped me get to the root of why I dealt with certain things was because I was afraid of being alone. I was afraid no one was going to love me. And that was why I sat in a lot of the relationships and dealt with those things, because I always assumed that if it wasn't this person, it wasn't going to be anyone. And so once I began to really cultivate the relationship that I had with God and understood how He saw me with that alone time, right? In that alone time, and really learning how to have a relationship, be in relationship with Him, not the rituals, right? That changed everything.
Everything.
You know,
it's so much harder to try to get it along the way. I feel like that's a part of the trick of the enemy is you think, oh, I can just keep, that's one more ball to juggle. I can do it as a mom. I could do it as a wife. I could do it as a working woman. But when that single season, you have the time to do it.
Yeah. And I think that's it. I think you just pinpointed it. It's the time, because once you have it, but once the kids get involved,
you have so many more excuses and distractions. Yeah.
Oh my God. And it's a blessing, of course, right?
Absolutely.
But it's but see, I think I feel like God's intention is to use that single season as preparation, right? Developing that maturity, because there is a lot of responsibility in becoming a wife, being a mom. Like, it's not just you. So when you use it as preparation, so I always talk about declaring and decreeing things and calling something and just showing up, right? Like, even for me now, one of the things I pray for is to have a business, How do I want to show up every day? What do I envision myself as? How do I look as this woman that I'm trying to become? There are things that I can do today that allows me to show up as this woman before the business isn't even doing what I'm praying for it to do. So it's the same thing. But I remember feeling stupid, literally, for thinking that I was a wife or I should look this way. And it's like, it hasn't happened yet, so I'm not going to do those things. But that's really to me, the key to the breakthrough.
Absolutely.
You begin to show up and act as such. Okay, so we'll move into, I love this. Okay. Let me wrap this up, because I don't want to take up any more of your time. Because I love this. And it's just been a blessing. It's like, God is so good.
Yeah.
Because there were so many things that I was afraid of doing this. And every time I'm talking and having these conversations with y'all, it's just beautiful. So I'm just grateful in this moment. So yeah, thank you, God. Okay. So this platform is catered to women who desire marriage. And what I found is a lot of times that woman is standing in her own way why it's actually not happening. Like you even said, going back to your story, I don't like, it's so funny because him paying for a date, that's so comical to me. Him paying for a date, like you were mad about that. Women out there trying to get men to pay for this.
Listen, I look back on it, and so sometimes the old me creeps up, and I'm like, and I would do it again. It really, like you said, that especially now having daughters, it's like I'm so blessed to have a husband who thought that way as a gentleman, even prior to all of this, to where now he can teach our daughters, and I can say, as a witness, listen, like, if he will let him be a gentleman, if he wants to be, that is a character trait that has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
That's just something that's rooted in him, and probably it could be, absolutely, we don't know, I don't just want to assume that all gentlemen, have a relationship with God, but it absolutely could be rooted in that, because kindness is a fruit of the Spirit. So it's
absolutely
connected, it's definitely a good sign.
Yeah.
Not one that you should be walking around upset at.
That is just funny because I feel like we always do that, right? So
Yeah.
talking about the woman who, like, we think that these things we're doing is protecting us, but what it's really doing is just preventing us from really getting the things that we're praying for.
Absolutely.
Um, so let's say that that woman is watching, and she's feeling frustrated because she feels like she's protecting herself. She's feeling like she's doing everything right, but then the relationships aren't working, the dating isn't happening, or whatever it's coming up, and she's becoming hopeless.
Yeah.
So what piece of advice would you give her to encourage her to still continue with the desire? I mean, honestly, not even the physical steps, but just the desire to want marriage.
Yeah. I would absolutely start with the encouragement of keep in mind that God uses every season. Every season is intentional. And I mean, honestly, even if we were to take faith off the table for a second and just talk very candidly, like even in a space where you feel like I'm trying to fill this space with something else right now, I would start with inventory. Take inventory of the space that you're trying to bring something else in. Kind of like what you were saying a second ago. Do you honestly feel like that space is you're individually filling that space already as the woman that you see yourself being in the future? Are you already showing up in this space as that woman? Because you have to look at it. If you're constantly like, oh, I don't have this, I don't have that, I don't have that, I don't have that, is the vision of the woman that you want to be in the future someone who's full of anxiety? Because that's what that's a sign of. Like, and that's something to deal with. That's something to potentially unpack. Anxiety is in your space that you're trying to bring something else into, like start from within. It's so funny. I just told my husband, we've been praying over the spirit of excellence in our household. We just came across a Bible study that talked about excellence doesn't mean perfection. And so with that, it made me more comfortable with saying, God, I'm praying for a spirit of excellence, just like how you created the world. And it was excellent when you did it. When you created us, it was in your image. So we were obviously created with just a hand of excellence. So me being the woman that I want to be, when I'm thinking about if I was being that woman and wanting all of these things, including marriage and children, et cetera, I would pose the question of, are you showing up excellent in that space to be prepared for what you're trying to manifest and that you're waiting for? And that's faith aside. Yeah. Like, so when you bring faith back into it, then of course now we're talking about your relationship with God. Have you asked God what this season is for specifically? What is this season for? He doesn't just be like, you know what, I'm gonna take a break today. Let me just see how you maneuver. You ain't do nothing wrong. I'm just gonna sit back for a second because I'm tired. Like, no, we don't have a God that does that. Yeah. He's always present. So just going back to him and saying, what is this season? What am I missing? Let me put my wants to the side and say, God, what am I missing? Am I missing a business idea here? Am I missing a mentorship opportunity here? Am I missing a spirit of generosity? I'm so focused on myself. Should I be looking more outwardly? Like, that's what I would say. There's always, because it's a space and you feel like it needs to be filled, it doesn't mean it has to be filled with the husband. Let's deal with the space first. There's a space there and it's for a reason. So.
Okay. That was good because you always think of it as that relationship. That's good. I probably should have filled it with something else too, but I was so like, I gotta be married. Now. So that's good. Yeah. That kind of okay. All right. So I'm enjoying our conversation. Okay. Now I know you've dropped a lot of gems and you've shared your journey, but I want you to kind of look back just over your life versus just your single season and just maybe, honestly, you just had another baby. I'm sure you've learned this in her 2 months of being here. Mm-hmm. Learn more. So I'm just giving you an idea of just over your life.
Yeah.
One piece of advice or one quote, saying whatever, scripture.
Yeah.
Just one thing that has always stuck with you that you've felt has kind of carried you into success, into your marriage, into motherhood. what piece of encouragement or advice would you share with the woman that's listening right now?
Ooh, one piece of advice. I like how you put it when you said something that stuck with me. I felt like that'll be easier for me. Something that I know that's stuck with me that I've always like fallen back on, honestly, through my entire life is just knowing that, and this is faith based, knowing that there is nothing that I can do that will ever separate me from God's love. And that's Romans 8, 29, 32, 31. And just it's an entire list, like, hell cannot separate you, demons cannot separate you, like, but just that one part that says nothing that I can do can separate me from God's love. That has been honestly my saving grace through all of my seasons when I'm just on the floor bawling. I always come back to that.
Yeah, it's funny because my pastor is talking about God's love and just saying how sometimes we get so caught up in, even the song, I love God, you don't love God. Like, what's wrong with you? And so thinking that we have to express and tell people how much we love God, but what we should be focused on is his love, right? And he talked about how God is constantly always pursuing us.
Yes.
And when I think about it that way,
yeah,
like I said, when I realized that he created me and designed me and he loves me, it changed the way I saw myself and how I showed up.
Yeah.
Thinking that if I thought less of myself, that was doing God some sort of honor.
Justice. Yeah.
I was like, no, God wants you to show up at your best and think the best of yourself, because he, like you say, there's nothing that you can do that's going to separate him. And a lot of us are walking around thinking that God is angry at us and, and he's keeping something from us, when in actuality, like she just said, maybe that space needs to be filled with something else, and maturity needs to happen, and developing in a certain area so that you can move to that next season. But he's been talking about God's love, so it's funny you say that, because that has been a game changer for just peace, not even eating the things that I prayed for, but just having peace every day. So that's, he just talked, like he's been having a whole series on it, but just saying how much he loves us no matter what.
Exactly. It's so easy to minimize God on a day-to-day and put
him in a box.
Put him in a box, and the constraints of how people love, how we love just human to human.
God.
It's so easy to minimize.
Oh my God, this is so crazy. He's just talking about how we're so conditional, like how we love, like, okay, I might not be mad at you if you, I don't know, if you stand me up, but if you cuss my mama out, that's,
we would love it. So again, it's one of those things to easily say, oh, I love you unconditionally because God loves me unconditionally. Listen, we're human, baby. We're human. We human. We don't, even though we don't put, just because we don't say it, it doesn't mean that we don't still deal with deal breakers. And it's so easy to think of God that way because we physically can't see him. But the reality is God is just so much bigger. I literally have moments where I'm just like, when I'm in my car, I'm driving, or I'm in the shower and I have a moment, I'm like, God, you're just so big. You're so great. You're so big. I cannot fathom, honestly, just being in your presence. Of course, I dream of that, but even in the Bible, it talks about when you're in his presence, he's so bright and big, you can't even physically see his face, like, just because that's how big he is. So how it's so crazy how we still try to think a big, big, big God will just hate the fact, or can't forgive the fact that what I did 2 nights ago, or what I did, just the thought that came 2 days ago, as if he's just incapable, as if he's human, but he's not. So just taking him out of that box. I have to remember to do that. I think another pastor like did a great job at like physically demonstrating it. Just the idea of when you're getting ready to leave the house, always remember to put on God, put on the armor of God. Remember, He's always there. Like, and the good thing about Him is He's not connected to just something tangible and physical. It literally is just calling on Him.
Yeah.
He's there. Like,
Yeah.
it's that simple. So yeah, His love and being reminded of His big love that He gives, His big love. I can't even stop Him from loving me. It's just,
girl, you are here. He said, don't, like, you and your foolishness or whatever you're doing, like, do you think that you and your mess can compare to God's? Like, you think that big of yourself that you think you can stop God's love?
right.
Like, basically, there's no way.
No way.
But it's the truth. Like, religion has really messed us up to think that it doesn't. I have to pray a certain amount. I have to,
Gotta be in church.
fast or, whatever the things are, right?
Yeah.
Go to church. Like,
gotta be
me
doing
not
Bible
going
study,
to
gotta be doing
church.
gotta make sure I'm there on Wednesdays too. Gotta make sure I'm
Right.
doing that. Like, yeah.
So
The
you
rituals.
think that if you don't come to
Yeah.
church on Wednesday, that's gonna
The
stop God
rituals.
from loving you?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Like, I hate, so okay.
Yeah.
So cool. I really enjoyed our time together. So I appreciate you for being transparent and just going in line with what God is doing. You know what I mean? I always pray that this is a blessing to at least one person, and just being transparent about your journey. I know that, sharing it openly can feel some sort of way, but I appreciate that. And I always ask, just show up and be yourself, because everyone hears something differently. And we all speak to someone some kind of way. So I appreciate your transparency and your time. I know it's Sunday. So thank you so much for joining us, Sierra. And for you guys that are watching, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you for taking the time to join us with Wifey Wisdom. Today, the gems were dropped. So I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And I always pray that God will bless your week, and understand that nothing can separate you from His love. Nothing. I don't care what you did last night, last week. I think I believe that God wants us to just show up as our best, right? So you're never going to be perfect, right? And the only thing that we can do is just honor God with our lives, do our best, and He will do the rest. And no matter where you are, just get Him involved. And I promise your life will never be the same. So specifically talking to relationships, if you desire marriage, get Him involved. If you're struggling, honestly, if you're doing well in your relationship and, get Him involved. I promise your life will never be the same. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week. Have a good day. All right. Bye-bye.